Hello, my name's Sarah Marshall. We're Bett. We welcome you here today. This is a webinar about remote learning, evolving pedagogy and the hybrid model. I'll introduce our presenters in just one moment, but I'll just let you know a little bit about Bett. Bett is the world's largest education show and community, and our mission is to bring together people, ideas, practices and technologies so that educators and learners can fulfill their potential. We're really pleased to welcome you here today. I can see we have hello from Greece, from Zambia, from Dubai, from Johannesburg, from Brazil, from Poland, so from Dublin, Malta, Italy. We're thrilled to have you with us today. So first thing I'd like to do is just to introduce our presenters and just ask you if you'd like to put questions, actually please do add them into the Q&A section, which is the next one along. I see Singapore, Scotland, Malaysia. Welcome everybody. So what I'd like to do is introduce our presenters. We've got 4 outstanding speakers for you today who come from all parts of the world and all parts of the education ecosystem. So I'm really honoured to have them, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they will do a far better job than I will. So Emma, over to you.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm looking at all the countries popping up and I feel truly humbled actually to be here in my little garden. I'm a teacher of 20 years plus. I do a number of different roles now. I work with trainee teachers to train them to become teachers in the Institute of Education. I also work at a pupil referral unit, which is a school for children who are unable to cope in mainstream settings. So I'm here with those 2 hats on. I'm also a writer. I've written a book called How to Survive in Teaching, and I'm just working on another one called Wellbeing, a guide to wellbeing and self-care for stage education. And I'm also here as a parent. So I've got 2 children in the background who may or may not appear at some point, who are doing home learning. So it's lovely to see you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Fiona.
Hi, afternoon. I'm Fiona Cottam. I'm based in Dubai. I'm the principal of Hartland International School. I've been in the Middle East now for 11 years, and prior to that was a head teacher in the UK. We went remote nearly 15 weeks ago, and we're in pretty substantive lockdown in the region. So it was immediate and it was transformational, I think, for all schools in the region. We've all taken different approaches in terms of what we've done. Listening to my colleagues around the area, I think everybody has had real success in their approach that has been right for their school and for their students and their community. So hoping that I can add something to the debate this afternoon, and you haven't set that bar too high for us, Sarah, when you talk about our expertise, but looking forward to the discussion.
Oh, wonderful, thank you. We have 2 Ians, so Ian Bauckham first.
Hello everybody, my name's Ian Bauckham. I'm here in the UK, where I'm the head teacher of a group of schools, primary and secondary schools, in the southeast of the country, in Kent, if you know where that is. But I'm here mostly to talk about my involvement in a national initiative called the Oak National Academy, which is a national online school that was created by a group of leading educationalists in England, in the UK, over the spring holidays, the Easter holidays in April, in response to the lockdown and the closure of schools, which had happened from the 23rd of March. And so I want to share some insights and learnings from that experience with you when I get a chance to do so in the discussion later. Very good to be here, though. Welcome.
Thanks, Ian. And Ian Pitman.
The other Ian's turn, yes. I'm head of technology in an international school in Kuala Lumpur. We've got over 1,000 students, preschool to year 13. We're in the very fortunate position of being like a very highly technological school, technology-rich environment we provide for our students. We've been twice accredited by Apple as an Apple Distinguished School. So we're kind of quite familiar with the technology that's been really useful over the last 3 months. We went into lockdown overnight on the 18th of March, and we had no access to the school at all. until very recently. And today is the first day we've got some students back in the building, so we're very happy about that.
Fabulous. Thank you. So I think the first thing I'd love to ask and to share, and again, please, people who are watching, if you want to ask questions, I will do my very best to answer them, or get the panel to answer them. So please add them into the Q&A chat there, and we'll get to them. But my first question is, what has teaching and learning been like during lockdown? We have some extremely different experiences here, so it'd be great to share those. Emma, would you like to speak first?
Yes, my first instinct is to answer as a parent. So we started out with a hugely ambitious schedule, starting at 8 o'clock each morning and going through till 6 o'clock, which included reading, numeracy and literacy. By the first Monday, about 10 o'clock in the morning, that had been literally binned. We took a long time to get into it. And, you know, we are a privileged, educated household with loads of books and value education, and we recognise our privilege in lots of ways. But we actually took a long time to get into a routine, which now includes a lot of very creative activities, a lot of cooking, a lot of gardening, a lot of the things that we don't usually have time to do. So it has been in some ways chaotic, in other ways eye-opening. So this morning I have looked into vegetables that grow in the city through to revising long division, but we found our rhythm now, and actually you know, I can see my children growing in front of me, which is brilliant. From the point of view of schools and the number of teachers I work with and support, my answer would be it's been hugely varied. So some schools, and I know our other speakers will talk about this, have been delivering lessons as normal, starting first thing in the morning and going through till the evening, and very much kept to those routines, whilst others have focused very much on the pastoral, regular phone calls to check that children are eating and safe and parents are coping financially. Other schools still, so my own children's teachers have been relatively hands-off, but it's worked. So an email or show my homework each day, each week, just to give them something to be getting on with. So there's been a huge variety. And interesting that Ian said, you know, people have done what's right for their schools. And I think the vast majority have been incredible and have got it right. But it has been a huge challenge.
Thank you. Fiona?
I mean, for us, teaching and learning, if I was to try and conceptualize it as a school principal, I think it's been both resilient and inspirational, and not without its ups and downs. It's been emotionally challenging for a lot of the children, and for a lot of the parents, of course, who've been stuck at home with them and who've been trying to manage their jobs from home at the same time as work with particularly the very young children. But we've seen incredible resilience on the part of everybody. We've seen new skills, new attributes. And just like Emma said, you know, we've seen cooking, we've seen design and technology and innovation and creativity that we could never have imagined. I think it's been inspirational on the part of what the children themselves have actually achieved. It's been quite phenomenal how they've carried on and how they've pushed through this, how they've tended to look at the brighter side all of the time. And certainly in terms of my staff, I'm nothing short of just overwhelmed and inspired by them all. They've been absolutely incredible. We hit blips around week 4 and 5 where it was quite stressful because people themselves were in, you know, a 1-bedroom apartment by themselves and not seeing anybody else in their own form of isolation. But they really have risen to the challenge, and they have ensures that standards have been maintained. And we'll worry about the gap later on, if there is a gap and what that gap might look like. But certainly the well-being of students and the well-being of staff in our community has been at the forefront of absolutely everything that we've tried to do. We've tried to maintain the pace, but it's been a different type of pace, and that's been okay. And we will worry about all those small little dips and gaps when we come together, hopefully in the future. So it's been challenging, it's been difficult, but it has been, I've seen some of the best leadership and some of the best teaching and some of the most inspirational output on the part of the whole community during this process.
Thank you. Ian, Pitman, if I might ask you to go first, because to hear your solution, and then Ian, Oak, we'll hear a little bit about Oak then, if that's okay.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah. The first word that comes to my mind when you ask about what it's been like, it's been hard. It's been hard work. really hard work. We started off with a moment's notice, and the way we've delivered the curriculum, the way we've run our education has changed over a course of a few weeks. We started off with following the curriculum, following the timetable, predominantly a kind of asynchronous approach with sending videos and support materials and online work for the students to do. But then we had the Easter break, and we were able to kind of sit back and evaluate what had been going on. And we rewrote the timetables and switched to a lot more online, live video conferencing lessons. And that's how we've been moving ever since. The majority of parents, families, and students seem to prefer that approach. They like that contact with the teachers. They like the face-to-face, the feedback. Anyone that's tried to teach a lesson online to 24 children, especially in primary, it's very hard work, but it does work. It works as well as can be expected. And we're very, very lucky that our students have got the technology to use, and the staff have got the technology to use to make it work. So it's revolved around the technology. But like Fiona said, the well-being of the staff and the parents has been an ongoing issue all the way through, and I think we'll come back to that kind of later. But we too have a lot of single teachers living in one-bedroom apartments who had only been in the country for 6 months. So obviously that was an issue to deal with as well. But we're very pleased with the way it's gone forward.
Thank you. That's great. Ian.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to give you a potted history of the Oak National Academy in about 2 minutes. That's my challenge from our moderator. So after schools closed on the 20th of March here in the UK, we had 2 weeks before the spring holiday. And in that 2-week period, it became very clear to us that we had an enormous diversity of approaches to remote learning. At one end, we had fully functional platforms where teachers were teaching a full range of 3, 4, 5 lessons every single day, with interactivity possible between teacher and pupil. And at the other end of the spectrum, we had a couple of long-term research projects set on a website that really children wouldn't be able to do without quite a lot of help from their parents. So in the April holiday, a group of educationalists got together and decided to try to offer the best of that range for everybody in the country by bringing together a team of volunteer teachers and subject specialists and putting together a lesson lessons for every subject, for every year group from age 4 to age 15 in every subject, with 3 hours every day in primary and 4 hours every day in secondary, covering the whole range of subjects. We did this pretty much in 2 weeks, which was an enormous challenge for us, but we managed to do it. And then the lessons are changed each week, and a new week's worth of lessons come online. If you've not heard of us and you want to have a look at us, we're free at the point of use. There's no login. The web address is www.thenational.academy. So you can be having a look if you want to, if you can multitask while you're participating in this seminar. So it's been incredibly successful. We've had about 12 million lessons of ours participated in, 12 million lessons accessed since we opened, and that was the count last week. So it's probably more than that now. We have a 75% return rate. So 75% of people accessing it are coming back, which is a really good signal. And also we have what I was initially a little disappointed with our completion rate, which is 60%. So that's 60% of lessons started are completed. But actually, when you look across remote learning and IT learning across the range, actually 60% is phenomenally high. University courses in the UK and America have a completion rate of about 3%. So 60% is phenomenal in comparison with that. So I'm not so disappointed anymore. We are going to be continuing and expanding next year beyond the immediate emergency, but perhaps I'll come back and say a bit more about that later. But if you want to look at it again, I'll just say that web address again. It's the national, one word, thenational.academy. Back to you, Sarah.
You. Thanks so much. That's great. So, given what you've said so far, and actually it's a question that's already come up by chrysanthe Soreriu. So let me just jump to this question, which actually is a better iteration of what I was going to ask you originally. And it says, in terms of pedagogy, what changes have remote teaching required, and sort of how have teaching methods changed during this period? So I guess what are the changes, and what does a successful change look like in your view?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in quickly there if you want.
Please do.
It was interesting listening to Ian earlier. We also made a transition very, very quickly to live lessons. Not that I think there's anything wrong with uploading work or uploading videos or using any of the other devices, but like Ian, we too found that the connectivity with the students was a lot better when we were able to upload and go live. And I've looked at some of the questions that have come up, and people are asking, well, how did you manage the whole concept of devices? Now, I have to say that even though we're in a privileged part of the world, of course, we still have children who come from families of 2, 3 or 4 children in some cases, and they only have one computer at home. So as a school, we've actually lent out machinery and equipment. We've lent out over 80 devices to make sure that all members of the family can fully access what's taking place. How has teaching actually changed? Well, I think teaching has changed insofar as staff have had to be very conscious of how they interact, what they say, looking at non-verbal communications, looking at more perhaps for the welfare of children, telltale signs that perhaps children are not coping as well as they might have been. We've abandoned homework completely, which of course at the start we thought we'll carry on doing that, but we've actually abandoned certain things to make that day better for the children actually. So we've constantly surveyed our whole community, students, staff and parents, to make sure that we're continually reviewing the whole time what we've done. So we haven't just stayed in one spot, but over the last 15 weeks, we've constantly changed and tried to improve till we've now found our groove, as it were, I suppose, and we're in the flow of what we do.
I'm happy to come in. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to come at this one from a slightly different angle, partly because I think my colleagues here are a better place to talk about, live lessons and so on, and partly because of my work that I'm currently doing with some of our more deprived and more vulnerable students. I'm acutely aware that as a group of presenters, we're quite homogenous, and we actually do represent probably a group of quite privileged students overall. The group I work with in Buckinghamshire are students who are unable to access the curriculum for all sorts of different reasons. So we actually have gone right back to basics in the sense that we've been, rather than relying on IT, and I know I'm going away slightly from the theme of this webinar, but we've been visiting them at home. So we've been delivering food, and just not to forget actually that power of a phone call. So whilst IT is incredible and amazing, let's not forget that, even in this house, when we had an accident with a glass of orange juice and a laptop, that with two of us working full time and 2 kids doing home learning, that resulted in complete chaos and fighting over computers and broadband and everything else. So just not forgetting about the basics amidst all of these amazing sources of technology, because the best thing that happened to me as a parent was receiving a phone call from both children's school every 3 or 4 weeks just to say how you all doing and well done, you're doing a great job. So it's just not forgetting about those basic human contact things as well.
Yeah, going back to basics is one of the things we decided during that Easter break. We thought we were just trying too hard. We were trying to fit too much in. Students, no way could students achieve as much or do as much at home as we would expect them to do in the classroom without that teacher support. So yeah, we kind of went a little bit back to basics. One of the teachers said to me just the other day that this period has made them streamline the way that they prepare the resources and the activities, and it's encouraged them to be a lot more explicit in the instructions that they give, and that these are things that they want to carry on back into their classroom practice. And a teacher said today, I just put myself in the shoes of a 12-year-old at home and decide what do they want to do, what's going to appeal to them. So going back to those very basic principles of education and communication with the students.
Thank you.
So one of our mottos at the National Academy from the beginning was never waste a crisis. Never waste a crisis. So what we wanted to do was use this opportunity to make more teachers and more schools aware of best possible practice in curriculum and pedagogy. So we were able, because of our size, to get the best possible advice from leading researchers on pedagogy, and we were able to reflect those in our lessons. So our lessons have key features like explicitly building on previous learning, questioning at the beginning to ascertain how much pupils know, really clear teacher explanations in small chunks so that pupils' working memory is not overwhelmed, practice to reinforce new knowledge, and then at the end, summary questions to help pupils practice recalling what they've learned. So that's a very, very quick summary of some of the features, but we wanted to use it as a way of getting more schools and more teachers aware of some good practices in pedagogy. So that's the small contribution that we tried to make in England as we did this piece of work.
Thank you. Thank you. Sort of building on that quality assurance question that we're asking, that's come up quite a lot in the Q&A as well. How do you quality assure the experience, and how do you ensure that there is a positive quality learning experience for the students and also the teachers? Ian, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think a part of creating the positive experience comes back to the well-being of the students as again. You know, we've gone online every single morning with our students. We've had a morning registration period, like a touch base, have a chat, you know, check that they're okay, and then we've got the live lessons throughout, and then a check-in at the end of the day where the students come and join in, and creating that bond and creating that extra level of communication kind of really helps to provide, you know, a greater experience of the school day. And with having live lessons, even if the live lesson is only quite short, the teacher stays online while the students are doing their work, so the students can drop in and just have a little chat or ask the teacher a question. So there's always somebody there for them to go to, and they chat online as with Google Hangouts. There's this constant stream of chat going on, so the experience is improved because they've got that level of communication, I think. On top of that, you know, all of the heads of department and year leaders, they've all got access to everything that's going on. So from quality control point of view, everything is open. Everything can clearly be seen. So, you know, everyone's just working hard to get it right.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Ian. It all comes back to communication, doesn't it? And it's been incredibly difficult to start with. But actually, if we can keep those lines of communication with parents, with students open, and that personalised communication. So if a child has some way of saying to a teacher, actually, I'm struggling with this aspect of geography, and the teacher comes back to reassure them that actually it's okay, others are struggling too, that can actually make a huge difference to a whole day of home learning. For all of us. Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's down to communication, but how you don't. So as I said, there was a huge diversity in the response to the crisis because there was very little guidance here in England. And so head teachers were very much left to just jump, and some did brilliantly and some were slightly overzealous and some really struggled. But initially there were a number of teachers coming to me saying they were having online observations. So imagining their line manager popping up in the corner of the screen to do a written observation of the quality of their teaching. And that there were Ian's laughing, I laughed. It's always one of those examples where you think, oh, this will be a one-off, and then 5 or 6 more people come and get in touch. And it's absolutely fine for the line manager to pop into a lesson to see the student, to see the teacher, because just as they would in a classroom. But I think what some schools did was they fell for that slightly overzealous monitoring quite early on. So that's not how you monitor. It's about talking to students, talking to teachers, talking to parents, keeping that communication open.
So we in Oak, we quality assured in a couple of different ways. We did a lot of training of the teachers who were going to be teaching. We appointed subject leads and then trained them in the approach that we wanted them to take, including in their presentational skills. And then we've done surveys of users and surveys of teachers using, for example, Teacher Tap, which some of you may be familiar with, which is a mobile phone friendly regular survey of teachers to ask them what they thought of Oak provision. And overwhelmingly, Oak teachers surveyed said that they would recommend Oak provision to pupils as a way of supporting their learning. We haven't actually sat in the corner of any lessons being delivered, and that's because in our context, the lessons have to be recorded. So we don't do that, but we do quality assure at the point of input. And can I just say something briefly on devices? Obviously, access to devices is a key problem here and potentially a key barrier. And it's really interesting to hear how other speakers supported families with devices. The only thing I can say from the point of view of Oak is that because we use Google Analytics, we can tell what kind of device pupils are using who access Oak lessons. And of the 12 million lessons that have been accessed so far, 70%, 70%, have been accessed on laptops or desktops, 15% on tablets of different sorts, for example, iPads, and 15% on mobile phones, which is quite interesting because very often people say we've only got one computer or laptop to share, but actually a significant proportion of pupils accessing Oak are actually watching the lessons on a mobile phone, a smartphone.
Okay, great. Fiona,
my apologies. I was answering questions earlier and I completely forgot to turn my microphone off. So apologies to those that I upset by doing that. It's interesting that Ian and I could almost be in the same school in many respects because that and we haven't spoken about this, but it's phenomenal that the parity and the similarities in the direction that we've taken in terms of, the well-being of having those morning conversations with students and the same in the afternoon. We've had drop-down days where we've not had any lessons whatsoever, and we've had heart-to-heart and well-being discussions. We've done parents' evenings online again to try and keep that connectivity and to make sure that keeps going. However, in the UAE context, we actually have had what's called a distance learning evaluation take place by the inspectorate. So each school has actually had a formal one-day visit. It was called an evaluation as opposed to an inspection, but they did come into lessons formally and they did do lesson observations. They did have conversations with children, with staff, and with different groups. So again, we've absolutely avoided as a school doing any form of quality assurance formally with lesson observations. I think our staff are are stressed enough without them thinking that we're making judgments about the quality of their teaching from afar. I think our children have given us the feedback that we need, and a 98% attendance rate daily on average is actually the answer. I don't need to find out any more. The fact that children have been so engaged in attending lessons and so grateful to be in lessons is actually testament to the quality of what's taken place.
Yeah. That it brings me to engagement, actually, and there's a few questions. Few people have been asking this: is how do you keep people engaged with the remote platforms? There are a couple of anecdotes in the chat that say that sort of after the most recent half term, there's been a bit of a drop-off rate, and also how do you keep students engaged if they're not perhaps online all day or have the access? Yeah, Ian.
I'm just picking up on your comments that many have felt that there's been a drop-off after the recent May holiday. Actually, we saw our largest increase in use in the week immediately after the May holiday. I don't know exactly what that means. It might mean that lots of pupils were bored in the Easter holiday because they couldn't go out and see their friends, so they were desperately keen to get back to work and log on to their platform. But obviously it's a problem, and in remote learning, the one thing you can't control is pupil behaviour in the home. So if somebody switches the computer on and then walks away from it, you have no power to stop that. Whereas if you're in a real school, you can tell them to go and sit down at their desk and get on with their work. It's difficult to do that, but partnership with parents can really help. So if you identify a problem with your pupils not accessing remote learning, you can contact parents, discuss what the problem is, and suggest some ways of encouraging them to go back to their learning and continue with it. So I think a lot of this is about the quality of learning on the one hand and good quality partnership with parents and families on the other.
That's interesting. Emma, do you want to come in? Yes.
Yeah, I just think actually the good old fashioned, I keep coming back to this, but back to basics, the good old fashioned reward and recognition. You know, most schools have kept the newsletter going, you know, just well done to so-and-so in year 8 for being student of the week in RE. Those things have really actually helped at this end. And conversely, I've just remembered the line from the school newsletter, which said, to the 5 boys in year 10 who are not engaging with online learning, we know, it was effectively said, we are watching you. And it was brilliant, because actually it just gave parents that message that the head teacher is on it. You know, we're watching. Similarly to the parents on Facebook discussing photocopying, you know, we can assure you you're not expected to photocopy your own work. You know, just letting people know that you've got your finger on the pulse and you're in tune with what's going on, I think can actually really help move things forward.
Thank you, Fiona.
I think it's important, though, to recognise that some children have genuinely struggled with this and have not been as connected as they might be. We've ensured that the work of our school counsellor has continued. So we've maintained the connectivity. And I think going back to what Ian Pittman said, really that's the fundamental of a great school, isn't it? It's about connectivity. It's about relationships. We haven't seen a drop-off, actually, after any Eid for us, where we had a longer weekend. We haven't seen drop off in that way either. The children have remained very, very engaged, but we have to acknowledge that it just hasn't been a garden of roses for everybody, and that many of them, this has been a very long and difficult process for quite a few of them. So I think they're actually excited about having that connectivity every day with, you know, human beings and interaction. They're so looking forward to coming back to school in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways we maintained engagement was we worked through holidays as well. We have a lot of public holidays in Malaysia, and they all seem to fall in around May when we were during the lockdown period. And we thought, well, what is the point in taking a holiday when nobody can go anywhere? Literally, we were not allowed to go anywhere. Yeah, one person in the household was allowed to go to the supermarket. That was all. So we have students that had not been out their building for 10 weeks. And we thought, well, what's the point in giving them a day's holiday if they've just had an Easter break, etc. So we actually decided to, for some of the public holidays, we provided work, which was optional. So they still had plenty to be getting on with if they wanted that. And then some of the other public holidays, we actually decided to work and deliver live lessons. And I think that that just gave a very powerful message to the students and to the parents that we were serious about our business, and we wanted to support them. And again, part of the well-being, it keeps them occupied, stops them getting totally bored out of their brains. So and the other thing about engagement comes down to quality teaching. The teachers have just been so inventive and creative in how they present the work and the resources that they're creating, and the funny little videos they make to engage the students. And there's a whole list of kind of apps and things that our staff have become experts at, because they want to be able to present the content in so many different ways.
Thank you. I have a question about learning. So Ian, sorry, did you want to come in there again? You're on mute. There.
I think that expression, "you've been on mute," has been one of the things that with me in this period. I was just going to make a couple of comments, actually. One colleague I noticed in the questions was asking whether you could integrate Oak lessons with other platforms. The answer to that is at the moment you can't, but from September you will be able to. Is it okay, Sarah, just to move briefly onto the hybrid model? Because I just wanted to make a comment or two about that. Is that all right?
That's fine. Go ahead. Yes.
I'm not going to preempt your questions. So
no, that's fine.
One of the things that teachers have said to us is that an obstacle for using our lessons is that our curriculum planning, our overall curriculum planning, doesn't necessarily match their curriculum planning, and they don't know what we're planning to do next, because at the moment we're only giving our curriculum plan 1 week ahead. So one of the things that we're going to be doing over the summer, ready for September, is planning a whole year's curriculum and publishing that, and then offering lessons to go with that entire whole 1 year curriculum plan. And that, we think, will make it easier for schools to operate the hybrid model. So none of us knows what the situation will be in September. We all hope we're back at school as normal, but it is possible that we will have further disruption to school, and schools may have to be closed for periods of time, or some pupils not able to attend. So we wanted to make it easier for people to operate a model where, for example, they had 1 week in school and 1 week at home, by showing our curriculum planning in full up front, so that teachers would know what to teach in week A if they had to have pupils at home in week B and ask them to use Oak lessons. So that's one of the ways we're trying to support the blend. We're calling it the blended model. Yeah. You're calling it the hybrid model, but I think it's the same thing.
It's the same thing, I think so. That's great. That's really helpful. So just moving on, I'd like to ask a question about the students, and it's a question that's a lot of people have sort of upvoted. So that is, do you think that being ultimately forced into embracing remote learning will create more independent learners in the future? I'd love to hear, Fiona, you look like you that's a wry smile.
Well, I just think it's a $6 million question. I think we're unsure. We'd like to think so. I think that there has been definitely more research. There has been more autonomy. I think children have had more control of their learning. And I think that they're all good signs that that independence and that thinking has actually changed. Maybe not changed in the way that we might have done it had we been in school, but actually has become something quite unique and something different that we're going to have to make sure as teachers that we capture and don't lose sight of, and don't just go back in and try to take control again. So there's actually exciting opportunities, I think, for teachers to develop pedagogically to make sure that we don't just revert to type and take control and say, this is the topic and this is what we're doing, and actually use that independence that children have had to develop when they're home, solo and alone, and really embrace that. So yes, actually, I'm incredibly hopeful that that autonomous learner and independent critical thinker will actually just rise and flourish, and we just need to embrace it when we do go back.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I really passionately agree with Fiona actually on this one, because you know, I've talked about my 12-year-old has suddenly developed a passionate interest in Black Lives Matter and has been watching the news and informing herself and reading and coming downstairs and talking about these issues that maybe might not have happened if she'd been in school in ordinary times. And another anecdote is one of a particularly hard to reach student who had struggled in school all the time, but had her form tutor calling home daily and has just flown in both her maths and English as a result of that individualized attention. And finally, I talked about this when we first met, but my 10-year-old was on her phone early on in lockdown while she was supposed to be working, and I nearly took her head off because that was against the rules. And I stopped outside the door and just listened for a moment. And she was saying, well, how many 17s are there in 77, Sophie? And what they were doing was they were actually sitting and working together, both with their phones on at the same time. And the same evening, they set up their own Zoom quiz and just sort of booted me off the computer and said, we need Zoom now. So actually, you know, and it's about not going back to how we always do things. That is the absolute, we cannot do that. You know, it's capturing it, as Fiona said, it's actually saying, right, what have you been doing? How have you been creative? And how can we really exploit this now? So I think there's quite an exciting possibility there, actually, a real sense of optimism.
Yeah, I've had feedback from a lot of teachers that have said that a lot of their students have thrived in this environment, and they've become more resilient, they've become more independent, they're managing their schedules, they're organising their timetables without supervision. So for a lot of students, it really has given them a real boost. And I've got words like independence, resilience, creativity. They're seeing it all come out of some of the most introverted of students as well. So obviously there's a possibility it's going the other way for some students, but the majority of feedback I've got is very, very positive.
At risk of breaking the consensus here, I'm just going to offer a different perspective. I think it depends what you mean by independence. I think for a lot of students, they've had some space in their lives and some freedom to discover and explore interests, as Emma was saying earlier about her own daughter. And I think lots of children will look back on this period as an amazing period in their childhood. Is this the end of the need for teachers? Do you mean independence in that sense? I would say no, actually, because I think if you remove the intelligence of the teacher behind the construction of the teaching program and the curriculum, then you end up effectively breaking society, because you end up with a population where there is no agreement on what the shared knowledge is that everybody should have in order for us to live and work together as a society. So shared knowledge in a society is essential for that society to hold together. And that is, to a significant extent, the role of schools and teachers to manage. So yes, it's been a great time. Yes, lots of interests have been discovered. Let's not forget, for some people, it's been a terrible time where they've been stuck on their own, away from their friends, without resources, in some cases in abusive context. But can we manage without schools or teachers in the future? Absolutely not.
Thank you. Ian, I have a couple very specific ones for Oak, if you don't mind answering very quickly, and they are, well, perhaps not quickly, they are around provision post-16 and whether the platform will remain free, if you're able to just jump into those.
Yeah, so provision post-16 we are not going to be doing, I'm afraid. That is just one step beyond what we have the capacity to do. From September, as I said earlier, we will have a full curriculum plan for everybody, available free at the point of use, so free for everybody from September, with lessons from year reception, which is age 4 in England, up to year 11, which is age 16, in most of the main subjects. So it will continue to be free, and it won't be for over 16s.
Okay.
Is that a quick enough answer?
That's really helpful. Thank you. A couple more. I realise we're running out of time. I wonder if we might just jump into inclusion briefly. If the panel might just mention, I suppose we could discuss synchronous, asynchronous learning, but really, what are the challenges and opportunities for students with SEND?
Well, some students with SEND have really, really flourished at home. And I've spoken to a number of parents of children with autistic spectrum disorder, for example, who have actually really, really enjoyed finding their own little routines. And there are genuinely some high levels of anxiety amongst those students about going back, actually. And I don't know about anyone else, but the sort of sensory overload after sitting at home in front of a computer for so long, of being around people again, is something that we really need to be thinking about. But similarly, there are students with special needs who, as someone said on the chat, have all students flourished? Of course they haven't. And somebody also has pointed out on the chat that in India, the virus is peaking again. It's going up again, and people are scared because their neighbours are being tested. So we really have a lot of work to do around. I believe I've been doing this with Buckinghamshire and Buckinghamshire schools around training staff up on dealing with that kind of trauma and emotional self-regulation, and really dealing with some of that genuine, profound suffering, because it's been for over 3 months now. And for children who have been struggling at home, that is going to have a significant impact on their lives.
Yeah, certainly for us in terms of inclusion, I'm just very fortunate. I have an incredible inclusion team, and that includes English as additional language, which is over 50% of our population, and it includes traditional SEND. But it also includes gifted and talented children who need to be stretched and pushed in different directions. I'm, as I said, just blessed that I have a very, very good team who have still continued to support in class with teachers, still been able to pull out small groups and do additional levels of support. But it's been tough on parents, I would say, more so than it has even on teachers. Parents who've been at home trying to support their own children and give them that additional level of support and need. We've used Microsoft Teams predominantly throughout the primary school, certainly, and that has helped because we've been able to create those breakaway groups and those different types of support levels and tiers. But as Emma says, only time will tell. I think when these young people come back, we could, all young people actually, not just children of determination, but all young people, we could face a host of new challenges that we will have to address and that we'll have to look at as we reintegrate ourselves into some type of old normality.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've managed to increase our provision in many ways because we've been using our classroom assistants and even our science technicians to provide additional support. So, for example, in science lessons, the science technicians are standing by in other kind of Zoom meetings. So when the students are sent off to do their work, they can jump in and have a chat with one of the science technicians and ask questions. We've got the classroom assistants in primary who are joining in the lessons and then also taking out like small groups and individuals kind of to one side and do a little bit of one-to-one extra support. So in some ways, it's increased the amount of provision we've made. The effectiveness and the quality of that is debatable, obviously, but it's certainly something that's been very, very in the forefront of our minds, and we've tried to address it.
Thank you.
So Oak has got a number of specialist lessons available, which are not tied to particular ages in the same way as other lessons are, so they can be used more flexibly by pupils with particular kinds of SEND. Obviously, it's difficult to meet every single need because SEND is a very wide spectrum with many different kinds of needs, from learning to sensory to physical and so on. But we've got a range of lessons intended to meet the needs of pupils with special needs available that teachers and others can use flexibly as they see fit.
Super. Thank you so much. So I think we're pretty much running out of time, but if you would like to, perhaps I could just ask you each for a sort of a couple of closing comments. What would be your sort of your top three or your top three must-dos for a hybrid for a successful hybrid model? Sorry.
I will just say
Ian,
really good, clear curriculum planning so that you can switch between home and school easily, and you have great clarity about what is being taught at home, what is being taught at school, so that the pupils have a coherent, logical experience. There's one tip for you. Not the only one, but that's my one.
Yeah, well, obviously with my head of technology hat on, I've got to say you've got to get the technology right as much as possible, because if you're remote learning, if students are at home, they need access to the technology. The resources need to be based within some kind of online system. So I think it's very important that schools take the technology seriously, particularly with these events likely to happen again in the future. Get the technology right.
Look after the people behind the screens. That actually too much screen time can be really quite dangerous. Dangerous, I don't know, but certainly in the short term, headaches and nausea have been reported. So look after the people behind the screens. Remember that your teachers are teachers first, educators first. Other way around. Remember that your teachers are humans first, educators second, and your students are humans first, learners second. So look after the people behind the screens and don't forget about the basics.
Yeah, completely concur with Emma completely. And also I think it's about making sure that we keep listening to our community, to our children, to our parents, but most of all to our staff. Keep having those conversations the whole time to make sure that just because we've settled on a route plan, that we don't have to change direction, and that we don't become fixated that it must be done this way, so that it can naturally evolve, just like education should over time. So keep listening, keep talking, keep listening, and keep that communication line open at all times.
Fantastic. With that, Fiona, Ian and Emma, I'd just like to thank you so much for your participation today, and thank you to our attendees from all around the world who've been with us. I really appreciate your engagement and the questions. I hope we've answered as many as possible. Please do head over to bettshow.com and you'll find out information about what's coming next. You'll get an email of this recording in the next 24 hours, so feel free to share it with your colleagues and broader. And we just thank you again for your time on a very warm day here in the UK. So thanks. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.